welcome back to the channel. This is Luke with Luke F1 Fantasy. We are going to go through my Imola race preview and team selection on this video. This is the start of the triple header coming up with Monaco next week and Spain the week after that. So we are definitely going to be quite busy over the next few weeks. There's going to be probably some shakeups in the teams, I imagine. So just enjoyed a little bit of a week off from creating content, and now we are getting back into it. So let's jump into the preview for this week in Imola. So for those of you who are on my time zone here in Canada on the west side, Western Canada, we have free practice 1 and free practice 2 on Friday morning at 5:30 a.m. for FP1 and 9 a.m. for 9 a.m. for free practice 2 on Friday. For those of you in the UK, that will be 12:30 p.m. and 4 p.m. on Friday. And then free practice 3 on Saturday morning will be at 4:30 a.m. on Saturday here in Canada and 11:30 a.m. in the UK, with qualifying at 8 a.m. here in Canada and 3 p.m. in the UK, with a race at 7 a.m. here in Canada and 2 p.m. in the UK. So that is our schedule for this week. Now, looking into the weather, things are looking good. Obviously, we're still sort of a little bit of a week out here, but looking like it's going to be warm and dry. Potential for some rain on Sunday afternoon, but I think that's going to kind of come in after the race is done, or certainly towards the end of the race, if it does come at all. So we'll have to sort of pay attention to that, but certainly looking like more of a dry race than anything else. Now, if we take a look back into last year's race, just kind of get an idea of what it's like. What we see is that, it's pretty much, when we look at the overtakes for last year, it's definitely one of those tracks that's classed as a low overtake track. We saw an average of 2.3 overtakes last year, with most of those coming from the back of the field, with Magnussen getting 7, Stroll getting 6, Perez getting 4, Ocon 3, Hulk 3, Zhou 3. So definitely some little bit of a change in the pack, probably at the back. I can't remember how exactly that race started, but outside of that, you kind of got 1s and 2s for the rest of the field. Not much happening at the front of the field there. So probably one of those races that where you qualify is going to be obviously quite important. Again, not too many. I think it's more of a narrow track, so not really too many places to overtake. And then we had 1 DNF last year with Alex Albon too, so certainly a low DNF type track as well. So definitely go check them out. But as we kind of see from the budget builder calculator, like, things are looking pretty slim from a budget building perspective. Not too many of our B tier assets are looking to increase this week. So usually I would do a full buy, hold, and sell video, kind of talking through the pros and cons of each and every asset. Just with this week being a bit of a week where there's not really too much excitement happening in the budget building world, just with the chaos that we had in Miami with the DNFs in the race, that I think I'm just going to use this section right now, just kind of talk about a few assets that I think are worthy of talking about this week, and the ones that are generating the largest discussion. We can't go really any further without talking firstly about Colapinto's reintroduction to the game. And he has definitely come in at the price that we were expecting and definitely hoping, crossing our fingers, our toes, all last week, to coming in at the price of 4.5 million, which is great. I mean, I think it was the price that Jack Doohan was when he left the game. And so for those that are forced to make that transfer, at least you're not getting penalized in the budget perspective on having to, have to find new budget to be able to afford 4.5, or even if you were sort of at zero, zero budget in the bank and you had to change him out, it would have actually not made a lot of sense to do that. So 4.5 for Colapinto has come in, and he's come in at a great time where we're needing a few more assets to help boost our teams for this week. So, looking into his budget building potential, he needs 5 points for a 0.2 and 6 points for a 0.6. So certainly, and with an asset that's protected from not losing budget this week, I think he kind of comes in as our number one buy this week. The number two buy comes in as Lance Stroll, and Lance Stroll is back on our radars after a great performance in Miami, especially the sprint with 25 points, meaning that he needs 1 point for a 0.2 increase this week and 9 points for a 0.6. So we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of that as we kind of go into my team selection later on. Those are really my two sort of main buys. And then we kind of move into a section where I kind of think these are assets to consider. And this is all really just dependent on your team makeup, your budget, your points, how many transfers you have to use, as well as thinking ahead to building our teams for Monaco and Spain as they come up, and what we intend to do with those. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Alex Albon in the Williams. 6 points for a 0.2 and 18 points for a 0.6. Now the Williams are looking good. He had a top 5 finish in Miami race. And Williams just still seem to be improving week on week. And if it wasn't for Sainz having a couple of those unlucky DNFs earlier in the year, he would also sort of be in this category as well. But he's carrying that 0 points from Miami kind of through to, so Sainz is sort of off the limits at the moment. But Albon's looking someone who I'm considering to putting in my team. He's a little bit more expensive at 12.8 in comparison to other assets, but on a good run of form, and with a track like Imola, where it's more of a low DNF track, it's really just dependent on Alex and the Williams continuing to improve and getting into sort of the top 6, maybe top 7 to really try and get this 6-pointer or 18 points. So I think if Ferrari are continuing their slide and Williams are getting closer and closer and they have the ability to sort of out-qualify them, certainly last week, the Williams were keeping the Ferraris at bay. So if they do qualify ahead of the Ferraris, especially if they're looking fast and quick in the practices, then Albon's certainly becoming a strong play for me. The other one I want to talk about is Yuki Tsunoda. Now, Yuki is in a tricky situation because he's carrying a minus 17 from Saudi, but he did get 33 points in Miami, meaning that he's still looking quite tough for an increase this week. Needs to score over 26 points to see a positive increase. So the likelihood he's going to lose budget this week. But on a week where it's sort of difficult to see large budget gains, we're seeing budget gains potentially possible in the 0.2 ranges in the B tiers and maybe the 0.1 range in the A tiers. But on a week where budget may not be our best friend, I am considering assets that are in the beta category that are in cars that could quite easily crack the top 10, if not the top 8. And if Yuki, if Yuki can continue to improve in that Red Bull and he's showing good progress, he is an asset that I would consider putting in, even though he would lose budget, just to help me chase a few more points. And that's sort of the question I'm kind of saying to myself is do I want Stroll in my team where he may get 1 point and get me 0.2? or would I go for someone like Yuki that maybe can get me 10 to 15 points, but I would lose 0.2? So, there's definitely some. Yeah, well, I'll correct that. Like Yuki needs to score over 12 to avoid to get a 0.2. So, if Yuki's sort of looking to score me somewhere between 12 to 15 points, even though he's going to lose me 0.2, I might consider that more favorable over a Stroll who's going to score 1 point and get me 0.2. Or maybe I'm going to try to fit them both in my team. But those are some of the some of the ifs and buts that I'm thinking about. Because if Albon and Yuki are sort of able to crack that top 5, top 6, it's certainly I'm looking at them to basically help outperform the Ferraris. It really comes down to, if the Ferraris are going to continue with a slide, then someone else has to take that spot, and someone else has to take that common, like 6, 7, 8 position. And I think those would be sort of enough points or things to consider to try and get some of these assets in. And with that being said, like someone like Yuki, because he's got that 33 points, he is someone that I'm thinking a bit more long term, to thinking maybe I want him in Monaco as well. With Monaco again being a low overtake track, typically somewhere that you want to qualify high. So he might be someone that, yes, he might lose 0.2, but a good performance here, coupled with the Miami, he actually might be quite enticing for Monaco, to sort of getting that 0.6 increase. So you could be looking at Yuki sort of like scoring 20 or so points over the next 2 races and gain 0.4 budget, whereas Stroll may get you, I don't know, 5 to 8 points over the next 2 weeks. Maybe he gets you 0.2 this week, maybe 0.2 next week. So if you're gonna score 0.4, gonna gain budget of 0.4 over 2 weeks, would you rather have the guy that's maybe going to score 6 or 7 points, or the guy that's maybe going to score you 20 points over that 2-week period? So some things to consider for that. Now, from a constructors, I know there's a little bit of talk about Kick and Williams, and the main reason being is they are your 2 prime B tier constructors this week to kind of jump into that 0.6, where if there's going to be an asset that's going to get you the largest increase or the biggest increase, it's going to be the Kick and the Williams. Now you have to sort of take out a Mercedes or your Red Bull to sort of fit those in. No one's really taking out McLaren at this point, so just also be aware, you're not gaining 0.6, you're actually gaining 0.3, because Mercedes and Red Bull are probably guaranteed a 0.3 increase anyway, so the difference is 0.3. But if you're going to do that, it really comes down to, are you going to gain those points somewhere else? And I think the only really benefit to putting a Kick or Williams in is if you're really getting a top A tier driver back in. So if you're going with a Kick, you can afford a Norris. If you're going with the Williams, you're likely putting in a Russell. Now Norris is going to get you that 0.3 increase this week, as long as he scores over 19 points, which is probably quite definitely within his realm of options to do. Russell at 34 points to get a 0.3. He needs to sort of outperform one of the McLarens this week to be able to get close to that, possibly plus getting fastest lap or driver of the day. So Russell's probably more likely to only get a 0.1 increase. So there is some merit to it, and I'll have more information on that sort of later on this week once I take a look at the free practices and see where things are at, get a bit more of an updated sim calculator going on what the expectation is. But for me to really consider, say, a Williams-Russell build, again, I think a couple of things need to happen. Ferrari need to be just way off it. Maybe even I see Antonelli sort of off it, which is kind of making me move off Mercedes. And then maybe I could, maybe then I'll just kind of go the budget building route for a week and slip in a Williams and a Russell. Same could be said for if I feel like I want to, there is some notion for if you go the Norris and Kick route, you are kind of budget building in a sense, because you're going to get the extra 0.3 from the Kick team of getting there. budget increase plus the guaranteed of Norris. So there is a budget building aspect to that. And but it comes down to the price difference, right? Like Mercedes are kind of averaging about 50-ish points per week, 50 to 60 points. And so you're trying to see if you can make up at least, if not all of that, like at least like 70, 80% of it to sort of make it worthwhile to gaining that extra budget. So I think you want to see, get at least sort of 30-ish points. So Williams definitely can score, high 20s on a non-sprint weekend. See a couple of that with what Russell can kind of do. He may be kind of getting into like the high teens, early 20s this week. So maybe you can cover them off with a Williams and a Russell over a Mercedes. But there are some other differentials out there. You can, if Mercedes are not looking on it, maybe like someone else has to be taking up those spots, right? So figuring out if Mercedes are not on it, have the Ferraris figured it out for this week, have Red Bull figured it out for this week. So certainly some things to consider for that. Then if we kind of look into like the must sells this week, and it kind of comes down to basically anyone that's sort of DNF last week. So, Lawson's a must sell, Behrman's a must sell, Alonso's a must sell. My holds for this week would be people like, Esteban Ocon, maybe Pierre Gasly if you didn't get off him last week, maybe a Hulkenberg if he's still in your team, and a Bortoletto. Those would sort of be my holds because we just think sometimes we're just limited with what transfers we have, and if we have more priority transfers to make, then maybe we can hold on to assets like those to help us out in other ways. But if you are kind of like, if you've got like sort of 3-4 assets, maybe 5 assets that are sort of in the sell category, then this is probably a wild card week for you to try and just rejig your team around so that you can get some advantage this week. So my first option is looking into if I look into my team selection for this week. So like I said, my two main sells this week is going to be Alonso and Behrman. And with that, that's leaving me 20.4 million in the bank. So what I'm going to be able to do from there is, like I said, I think certainly Colapinto is a must buy for me. So that's leaving me with 15.9 million at this point. And I have a few options here at this point. And I think it comes down to, I could go with a Lance Stroll option, I can go with an Alex Albon option, and I can also go with a Yuki Tsunoda option. If I was to rate them now, I would potentially go with, I would go with Albon first, then Stroll, then Yuki. And I'm basing that on the notion that I think Williams are going to outperform Ferrari again this week. And so I look at that as saying Alex can have another strong week, couple that with last week's performance, and I think he's also good for a good performance in Monaco. If I feel like, though, that Williams aren't as close to Ferrari this week as they were last week, then I think I'll just kind of slip down into the more boring option and kind of go with a Colapinto Stroll build, which does leave me 6.2 million in the bank. But I think that'll be fine. I'll only be making 2 transfers. I'll be able to carry another transfer into Monaco, and having that extra cost cap in my bank will hopefully just give me a little bit of flexibility should I need to make any drastic changes next week. This also gives me flexibility also just to take a look at the performances this weekend to see a free practice, to maybe see if I want to swap out Mercedes. Maybe I want to go for an extra differentiator like a Red Bull if Max is looking particularly strong this week as well. So trying to get on that train a little bit early. And this team doesn't look too bad, right? This team doesn't look too bad. There's still there is budget potential in all of these. Oscar Sugar 0.3, Colapinto should go up 0.2. Stroll should go up 0.2. So there's probably like, about 1 million to 1.3 million worth of budget increase this week, which is probably about the maximum you can really hope to achieve this week. So this is really looking like one of the more stronger sort of budget building teams this week with a good balance of points. Now, I did speak about the other option of dropping down into a different constructor. So again, if Williams are looking particularly strong and they are looking more dominant than Ferrari, and I feel like they can maybe grab 2 of the spots between P5 and P8, then I do like the idea of still sticking with Colapinto, bringing in Williams, and then using my third transfer on bringing in probably one of whoever is looking the strongest out of George and Kimi that week. Most likely at this point, George. So I do like this team. I do think this team with Russell and Williams, I think they can cover off at least most of the points that Mercedes would offer on a given week. Plus, I think I'd be getting just a little bit extra budget gain from a Williams and a Russell, and certainly a little bit more points than a Stroll. So I don't mind the look of this build. And then the last one is looking at bringing in Lando, and then adding in Kick as my second constructor. Again, I do like this from a position of Kick should get me the extra 0.3 and 0.6 total, and Lando should get sort of a 0.3. So there's definitely budget potential increase in this one. If I was to go with this build, I would swap my 2x into Lando, because that will also give me the biggest differential, with most teams running 2x on Piastri. So if Lando's looking sort of particularly strong, if Oscar's looking a little bit off it, then this would be a reason why I'd jump into this type of build, because I think there'll be a points differential to be made. Yes, I'll lose some points on Mercedes, but putting the extra 2x on Lando, I think, should make up for that, and then you get the budget from Kick as well. So I only like this build if you're really going the Lando 2x route. I don't know if it's that worth it if you really want to go, if you're going to stick with PS3, because I think you're just going to be sticking with the field. And I think if you're taking a risk on a team like this, I think you may as well just go the full risk and go 2x on Lando for that. So yeah, it's kind of like there's some food for thought. I think I have a plan of like 3 different teams, and kind of I know what I'm looking for in the free practices to help me want to go into each of these. Again, we'll take a lot of luck to again avoid some DNFs. But I do like that we've got a bit more protection this week from a Bortoleto and Colapinto and a Kick. Potentially, there's 3 assets that won't lose you budget. There's definitely 3 assets that are guaranteed to increase with McLaren, Norris, and Piastri. So it's really about just figuring out what is the points potential. So now that I'm thinking about it, and as I go through this video, I actually think I might be leaning a lot more towards the Norris 2x build to give me a differential this weekend. Which kind of leads me into what am I thinking about Limitless this week? Right now, no. And the main reason being because I still think that Mercedes and McLaren are probably still the 2 strongest, or at least the strongest teams this week. And I think a lot of people still are having still have got a McLaren. I think people will be going with McLaren, Mercedes this week and Piastri. And I'm actually kind of sort of maybe re-looking at my Limitless strategy and trying to see where I can get the biggest delta on it. So maybe if Mercedes are looking a little bit off it this week, and maybe Red Bull are into it, then maybe a Limitless will come into me to kind of throw them into my constructor. So I'm kind of thinking as we get later in the season, it's Limitless may become more powerful as we go further into the season, and picking a week where maybe the meta team is looking weaker. For example, like I said, like Red Bull and Ferrari just sort of like turn it on one week, but people are not jumping off those as an asset in their team, then that would be a spot where we can maybe see some delta happening. But I'm kind of just not feeling at the moment that rush to play it, and I think one of the reasons for that is if budget building is sort of like stunting a little bit, and you know where Limitless earlier on in the season is strongest is because you're able to play a strong team before other teams have got the budget to sort of raise their assets. Um, but the to get into like a 4 quad build right now, like you need about 124 million to get into say like an Oscar, a Lando, a McLaren, a Mercedes build, which I'm at 110.7 now, so I'm like 14 million away. And if you can think about it, like 14 million is a lot. Like we've got 18 races left or 19 races left. So to gain 14 million in that time, you need to get like 1.3 million budget each week, and that's just to get it, just to be able to afford it by the last race. So if you're really wanting a 4 quad A build, you're hoping you got at least like 3 or 4 races to be able to run that, if not 5. And so you're kind of thinking, well, I've got to get 14 million now over the course of like 14, 15 races. So if you can kind of sort of build a budget, and that's a conservative guesstimate, because in 14 weeks that price of that team will be higher as well. But you're also you're also requiring on you having like 3 assets in there that are 4.5 million. But the point I'm trying to make is, as the season goes on, budget becomes less important. Lots of teams have if teams have improved their budget and they've got some decent assets in their team, well, the later I use Limitless, the less budget comes into play, and so that's one of those sort of differentials that I don't have to worry about anymore. I can just worry about just picking the top 5 best drivers and the top 2 constructors this week, potentially with the ability to go against the grain to what the meta teams are at that point. But as long as you hit those sort of same things, you still want all 5 to sort of, you want at least sort of like 3 to 4 of them to finish, to qualify in the top 5. You need like all 5 of them to finish in the top 5. I'm kind of hoping that one or 2 of the assets sort of like qualify lower down, and then they can like build up their points with some overtakes and some things as well. So it's kind of one of those things like later on in the season, when if teams are, if they're kind of like maybe if constructors like Ferrari or whoever, and or some of these these B tiers, and if they just feel like, our season's kind of running away from us, and maybe we're going to start shifting our focus into 2026 cars, and maybe we kind of see some B tiers sort of dropping off. Maybe that gives us more predictability to what the A tiers are doing. And so it may put us into a position where we feel more confident with our Limitless team selections later on in the season, when maybe 1 or 2 teams have given up and they're just not trying anymore. So again, that's not really something that I think is a definite that's going to happen, but it's a consideration, or at least some arguments that I can give myself to start believing that I think Limitless may just be just as powerful later on in the season. So maybe kind of looking at like a sprint like Austin, maybe somewhere where I'm thinking that I could start to plan for Limitless around there. And the other thing with the Limitless as well is that, like, when we talk about like the 4 quad A team, like having 2 A constructors and 2 drivers, it's like really at this point, the really one that's most looking like likely to afford is it's a Piastri, McLaren, Mercedes build, but it's still going to be tough to get into a Max. It's still going to be tough to get into a Lando. And so like the second driver is likely going to be a Charles or a George, and maybe Kimi as well. But I just don't really see the way the season's going. I don't really see George and Charles really winning a race this week, this year. Like I think it's really going to be between I think each week is going to basically be between Lando, Oscar, and Max as to who actually takes a win. So, I do think that maybe the quad A is not going to be that achievable, or is it going to be that great to have? Because if you're going with a quad A, you're more likely, you're going with an Oscar and one other. But let's just say, for example, Oscar, or or more like Lando or Max are sort of outperforming Oscar, then we're going to want to put Lando in our team more. Like if Lando starts winning races and looking more dominant, we're going to want to put Lando in our team more, because he's going to be getting more points as a winner of the race, qualifying top. Also got that chance for fastest lap and driver of the day. So I'd be interested to see, especially see how this season turns out, to see what ends up being better. Is it better to have a quad A with a Piastri and one other, if Piastri is not winning the race, versus going with a Lando and other assets to fill in from there, if Lando is just stacking wins upon wins? So I'm kind of still operating under the notion that I think the best way to win this game is to be able to pick the most race winners each week. I think they gave you the highest points tally, but it remains to be seen as we see things through. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. Thanks for watching. I will look to get my next video out probably after free practice 2. And I'll post my final team on Twitter, so make sure to follow me there. Make sure to like and subscribe this video so you'll get and put your notifications on, so you get notification when my next video is out. Otherwise, I hope you have a good week, and we'll catch you on the next one.